All right. So the question is, why do people sabotage the chance for having a healthy relationship? Like, what causes them to end up sabotaging what would be otherwise a good relationship? And really, the answer comes down to self-worth, and it comes down to experiences. So if I actually have this relationship and it goes through, will I be enough? And so subconsciously, I might try to pull back because I want to protect myself from getting hurt. I want to protect myself from getting abandoned or rejected. And so I put these walls up, which inevitably creates a disconnect with the other person. And it's not necessarily going to be something that is like conscious. It's going to be something that is more subconscious. And depending on my self-awareness, my emotional intelligence, my capacity for insight and introspection, I may or may not be completely aware that this is going on. If I've been to therapy, there might be a better chance, and I'm seeing this. But it's one thing to just learn a coping skill and be like, I don't want to do this. It's another thing to resolve that underlying trauma that is causing me to want to protect myself. Because when that happens, the way the brain works, like I've talked about this in like every video, my amygdala, my part of the brain that's responsible for fight, flight, freeze, or fold responses is going to hijack my prefrontal cortex. It's the logical part of the brain, the outside part of the brain that develops after you're 3 and doesn't until you're 24, but that's the part that gives you reason. And its whole job of the amygdala is to shut that down, to protect you, to give you a faster response time, to keep you from suffering. The problem is sometimes things that are very healthy were not healthy in my childhood, so they feel like they're gonna hurt. And in that case, my brain doesn't want me to be there. It wants to protect me like a soldier coming back from war, PTSD. Here's a firecracker. He's gonna think it's, something going off, a gun, whatever. It's an easy example, but it's the same process. It's trauma and your body's natural defenses to it. So until that's resolved, learning to cope with it is helpful. Learning to practice doing the opposite to try to retrain yourself is helpful. But until you resolve the trauma, you're going to keep playing out that dynamic when the stimulus is greater than your bandwidth to actually process it. So why do people sabotage? Because they want to protect themselves from getting hurt, even though that something super healthy or very healthy is right in front of them. It's just easier to sabotage. Now, some of the people who ask this question might actually be walking into relationships where they're enablers and they're playing out this whole dynamic and they're getting into the place where they're chasing the person who is distant and they're really emotionally unavailable. And they finally get that person who's distant, and then all of a sudden they don't know what to do with it because they're used to chasing. They're used to chasing a father figure, for instance, or a mother figure. And when they finally get it, they don't know how to feel safe with it because of anxious avoidance. Because what ends up happening is like once I get your connection and validation, now all of a sudden I have this huge risk. So if I get to the stage where I put a lot of effort into it, it's evidence that I'm codependent, they're codependent. If it happens before, I'm still a codependent, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're codependent. And that is an important distinction to recognize. So I can play out sabotage whether I meet someone who's healthy or whether I meet someone who's a codependent. I can still sabotage as a way to protect myself.